and welcome to BloombergQuint. Shock announcement from the Reserve Bank of India, and I don't use that word lightly. The MPC had an unscheduled meeting in which they have raised the repo rate by 40 basis points. That takes the benchmark rate up to 4.4%. And alongside, they have also hiked the cash reserve ratio by 50 basis points, and that ratio now moves up to 4.5%. Neeraj is with me, my colleague.
I wanted to ask you, we were talking about this before, that what could the RBI governor possibly say? And he's delivered something which is out of the blue.
Absolutely, Neeraj. And you know me long enough to know that I'm not given to hyperbole. So when I use the word shock, I think the market is certainly shocked. And the bond markets is showing that. You've seen yields jump almost 20 basis points. I don't think anybody expected this to come at this time. If you remember at the time of the last policy where they turned hawkish in their statement, where they moved from accommodative to accommodative with a focus on withdrawal of accommodation, everybody said that June rate hike is now very much live and on the table. And we all wrote about that the June rate hike is live and on the table. What happened in the last 1 month to prompt this? I think that is what we have to question.
Do you think?
So there are two or three things. One, I think at some level, they've realized that they're behind the curve. They realized that at the last policy. But perhaps at the last policy, if they had changed their stance and moved on rates and moved on CRR, that would have been seen as being inconsistent with what they had done in the February policy, which is stay accommodative with no change, right? So they changed their stance. And if you had seen comments that came out from different MPC members after the MPC minutes were released, J.R. Verma in particular said to our colleagues in Bloomberg that there is now nothing preventing MPC action. Now, what has happened since then is that we've got inflation prints which were uglier than expected. We've got a near 7% inflation print already for March, and it looks like the April print, from what economists are saying, is going to be closer, somewhere between 725 to 750. And I think the RBI and the MPC have panicked a little bit. I think they have said that we are already being seen as behind the curve, and when the next uncomfortable inflation prints start to come in, we will be seen as being more behind the curve, not just by the media, but by the markets, the bond markets, foreign investors. And then you take the risk of getting into a situation where your currency starts to see the impact. Already they have had to step in to defend the currency. If the Indian economy or the Indian policymakers were seen as being well behind the curve, you would have seen an impact there. And we already know there's a Fed meeting coming up later tonight.
That's the point, right? It's such an interesting timing that's happening just ahead of the FOMC, which is expected to be hawkish in its commentary and hawkish in its action, which is well laid out as well. The timing is very interesting to do it just at 8 hours before the FOMC announcement.
You could have argued that they could have waited, for another 12 hours. But if that had happened, they would have been seen as being reactive to Fed policy. Yeah. And I think the governor has time and time again said that, we take steps based on our, assessment of the domestic macroeconomic conditions.
As they did today as well, by the way.
They did.
Mentioned that we are not impacted by something to that effect.
Absolutely. So I think they are trying to say that, look, we are scanning the global universe, we're scanning the local universe, and we feel that higher interest rates are justified, as is tighter liquidity. I'm just going to focus for a minute on their statement on inflation. I think, he listed out a whole host of factors that are playing out, but he focused significantly on food prices. He talked about the fact that global spillover of food prices is being seen. High frequency indicators are suggesting that food prices are not coming off just yet, and that could all feed into inflation expectations. A little bit of history here from an India inflation standpoint. Food prices have the largest bearing on inflation expectation in India because our spends are so heavily focused on food. So while you will hear the regular chatter saying that, hey, interest rates can't control the price of edible oil and soybean, and yes, they can't, but they can limit the pass-through, the second round effects of it via wage increases. And I think that is what the RBI is trying to do by acting early. Also remember, now that they've acted now, they have a window to act again in June if required.
And not act in a very large measure in June if they need to do it in June as well, right? Absolutely. Because it's 40 basis points now, and then whatever they do when they do it in June or however. So that's interesting.
Yeah, I think it'll be curious to see where they go from here, because you already done 40 in one shot, right? People were talking about 75 basis to 100 basis points in a year. So that means you've done 40. There's still 60 or so lying up ahead, depending on where you are on the curve. But man, this was decisive. I can tell you that, if anybody said that the RBI is going to waffle on inflation, or if that feeling was settling into the market, then in one shot, the RBI has said, no way, Jose.
We are moving from growth oriented to whatever. Just a quick 20 seconds, the equity markets also showed that they were actually down ahead of the policy because people sensed that people were fearful. Nobody sensed it. People were fearful that what if there's a rate action? Those fears turned out to be true. And there's been a bit of a reaction and a sharp one at that, but to be expected. Nothing compared to the bond markets, I'm sure, but still a reaction that has been, I haven't seen it in the last 5 minutes, but I'm sure the trajectory has been downwards, particularly for the banking stock. So
but would you think that this would roil the markets more sort of medium term apart from a near-term jerk reaction?
Well, to give that answer, I wanted to check with you because I heard you watch the RBI commentary very, very closely. Did he sound excessively hawkish in his commentary, or was he kind of measured? What did you think?
I think he's hawkish. I mean, with a statement like this, or with actions like this, how can you not be hawkish? Although I have to say, and this is actually slightly, it doesn't sit well, at least with me. You're doing a 40 basis point rate hike. You're doing a 50 basis point CRR hike, and you're saying we are still accommodative with a focus on withdrawal of accommodation. Why are you not neutral? The explanation perhaps to that is that they feel that rates, even at this level, are accommodative in the sense that real rates are negative. So I think that is the theory that they will push if anybody were to question them on this particularly slightly contradictory stance that they've come up with.
Yeah, so just last 20 seconds, it'll be very interesting time for banks, Ira, considering that they are likely to post fairly decent results, not just the ones gone by, but likely to come up ahead as well. And at the same time, they're getting in an environment wherein rates are moving up, which technically should be well, but it will impact the market sentiment for sure.
Yeah.
And that kind of pushes back because Bank Nifty, like it or not, is still a third of the market weightage. So interesting times.
Yeah, and I'm going to close off with one last sort of disclaimer for a lot of home loan owners out there, home loan borrowers rather. Remember that a lot of rates have now been linked to an external benchmark. A lot of banks use the repo rate as an external benchmark. So I think we will see immediate pass-through of this action to home loan borrowers, which is an important constituency, of course.
Oh, yes, indeed. Well, let's see. It'll be interesting times ahead. And of course, Ira will be back with 3 experts at, I think, about 3 p.m.
Yes, we'll be back at 3 to take stock of this shock announcement. I'm using that word all over again. Thanks for being with us in Bloomberg.